Okie dokie, it's time to talk about battle avionics and the things that need fixing in this system. Now, this video is going to basically function like the tactical avionics video, so we'll go through each of the battle avionics, we'll talk about what's probably not the best about them, if there's anything that's particularly bad about them, and then we'll also talk about a couple of fixes that probably need to be made in order to make these battle avionics a lot better and actually to a much more acceptable condition. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First off, I don't like how there is a first, second, and third slot battle avionics system in place. What do I mean about that? You have 3 battle avionics that work with the first slot, 3 that work with the second slot, 3 that work with the third slot. And this is in the context of a system like Railjack where your ship is almost entirely modular. You can use whatever gun you want, you can use whatever reactor, whatever shield, whatever engine you want. Your tactical avionics are completely mix and match. Your integrated avionics are just like your modding system, of course, they are also completely mix and match. But your battle avionics are not terribly mix and match. You do get to mix and match them in the sense that you get to choose whichever first and whichever second and all that jazz, but I want to have the option to use something like Void Hole, Seeker Volley, Fiery Phoenix in one foul swoop, because then we have true freedom to mod our ship however we choose. Now you may be wondering, of course everyone would go for Void Hole, Seeker Volley, that seems like a really powerful combo, but you have to then remember that you are ultimately using a combo that is going to be burning through 200 flux energy. That's a lot of flux energy to go through, especially if you're using a Vidar reactor, which everyone is aiming for. The Vidar reactors, of course, have, I think, the least amount of flux energy attached to it, so when you're using 200 flux energy, even just on my build alone, that's a third of my flux energy gone just like that. And flux energy is rather important in my opinion. Alternatively, you could just choose to spam your abilities and then you would choose these lower level abilities like Munitions Vortex, Countermeasure, Blackout Pulse, in which case, yeah, you get to shoot out a lot more abilities, and that actually might be a little bit more effective if you're much better at using Munitions Vortex. Or alternatively, you could go a little bit in the middle, you could go for a Particle Ram Shatter Burst kind of idea. That could actually be really, really effective, and you might not necessarily have to spend 200 whopping energy just to do that kind of damage. But if D really wants to keep this system in place, fine, I guess. It's not really preferable, but whatever. It turns out that your first slot battle avionic is officially referred to as the defensive avionic, your second slot is officially referred to as the offensive avionic, and then your third slot is referred to as your super avionic. And because of that, I think it's pretty obvious when I say that Munitions Vortex and Tether need to swap. Munitions Vortex is, simply put, not a defensive battle avionic in the slightest. It cannot be used in defensive ways in any way, shape or form. It is just not effective like that. Instead, as an offensive battle avionic, when you feed it your own bullets, it is extremely effective. And it's the complete opposite with Tether. As an offensive battle avionic, doesn't really make much sense. It only does 3,500 damage if you decide to blow it up, which I guess is fine if you're on Earth, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot when you're in the Veil. Instead, obviously, it being a defensive battle avionic by tethering enemies together, that's going to be a lot more effective, and I believe that's actually the proper use of that avionic. So let's swap Tether with Munitions Vortex, and then we could potentially do something like having Tether and Shadow Burst together as a much more efficient combo as opposed to Tether and Void Hole. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual abilities themselves. We'll start off with the defensive, then the offensive, and then the super avionics. First one is going to be Munitions Vortex, and like I said, the only thing wrong with it is that it's in the first slot. It really shouldn't be in the first slot. It's not defensive. It should be as an offensive battle avionic. So just swap with Tether. That's it. Alright, the next one is going to be Countermeasures. Now, originally I thought that Countermeasures was really, really bad because it didn't work against cruise ships. It turns out that Countermeasures does work against cruise ship missiles. So otherwise, I don't have any real issue with it. I guess maybe increasing the duration of them so that they actually stick around for more than, I don't know, 5 seconds is probably a warranted buff to Countermeasures. Otherwise, it fulfills its niche. I have no real issues with it. The next one is going to be Blackout Pulse. Now, the main problem I have with Blackout Pulse is that enemy fighters actually continue to have some momentum even if they are hit with that EMP pulse, and I think that's kind of antithetical to EMPing a bunch of fighter ships. So I reckon any ships that are hit with the Blackout Pulse should just immediately be still. At least then you can have another alternative way of keeping enemies together so that something like Shadow Burst can be a lot more effective. Also, why does Blackout Pulse have 8 drain? That doesn't make any sense to me. It's the only defensive avionic that has 8 drain, and frankly I don't think it warrants it, so let's bring that drain down to 6. I can't really think of any way to make that Blackout Pulse worth 8 drain, even any buffs, so I reckon let's just bring it back down to 6 drain like every other currently defensive avionic. Now the first quote-unquote offensive battle avionic is Tether, and like I said, it doesn't really fit as an offensive battle avionic. Let's make it a defensive battle avionic. Furthermore, as a defensive battle avionic, let's lose the damage. It doesn't need it there. It's not necessary. It doesn't really make sense. It's really low to begin with, so it's already meaningless in the Veil, so we're not really losing a whole lot of value. Instead, the range of Tether should be increased, I think. It is kind of a little bit on the small side, and also one thing that I would really like to see for Tether is that any new ships that come within range of Tether, even after it has already tethered a bunch of enemies, should also get tethered. So let's also increase the maximum amount of targets that can be tethered by Tether. I believe the maximum is 10 ? I'm not 100% sure about that. I do notice that sometimes a fighter would fly right past it and not get tethered. Let's make sure that that doesn't happen. The next offensive battle avionic is Particle Ram, and there's nothing wrong with it, leave it the hell alone. Final offensive avionic is Shadow Burst, and the only real problem I have with it is that there are no damage numbers even now, so I'm still not entirely sure what the bloody hell is going on with it. So D, please fix your shit. Let's get some damage numbers onto Shadow Burst. Okie dokie, the first of the super avionics is going to be Void Hole, simply because there's nothing wrong with it, leave it the hell alone. The next one is going to be Seeker Volley, and like I've said in the Seeker Volley video, it needs more damage. So far, right now, the main buff that has come since that video is the armor nerf to the enemy fighters. That of course has made Seeker Volley at least a lot better in a sense, but still not good enough. I think the damage needs to be increased by a lot more, and like I said, I think that it should be increased to a point where around 4, if not 5 Seeker Volley missiles should have the same power as one Tycho Seeker Mark III. So that's the main idea. How do we go about achieving it? Maybe we should add a damage buff to each missile as you increase the level of the Seeker Volley itself. For more details about that, check out that Seeker Volley video. And finally we have Fiery Phoenix, and oh boy, Fiery Phoenix is the real problem child of the super battle avionics, because it's not super in the slightest. So D needs to make a choice. Is Fiery Phoenix meant to be a super offensive battle avionic, or is it meant to be a super utility battle avionic? So if it's going to be a super damage battle avionic, the damage needs to be ramped up by a lot, because right now the damage is absolutely pathetic. The trail damage needs to be increased to a point where any fighters that happen to come across it explode almost instantly or take at least half their health in damage, and the damage buildup needs to be increased by at least 10-fold. Because right now, when you release it, even after like half a minute of build-up, even after like 2 minutes of build-up, hell, even after building up for an entire mission in Gaiam Point, the amount of damage that you do from that explosion, quote-unquote, is an absolute fart. It's not good. Alternatively, and I would actually prefer this, maybe Fiery Phoenix should be a super utility battle avionic, in which case, lose the damage. Just straight up lose the damage. Trail damage is completely meaningless, the damage buildup is completely meaningless, we're not going to be losing anything of value. Instead, the trail should be a status prop, probably something like the particle status prop, which will then increase the amount of damage that a fighter ship takes for a couple of seconds, and that of course builds up on top of itself as well. So if a fighter happens to stick in a trail, then suddenly they become a lot weaker to pretty much all forms of damage, so that's really, really good. And then the speed increase from Fiery Phoenix should be increased to, I think, 50%, because right now 10 seconds of Fiery Phoenix is actually worse than 10 seconds of flow burn, and you're still burning around 100 energy, so that's really, really bad. And also the tankiness, I think, should also come with a rage mechanic, because otherwise just pure tankiness isn't all that noticeable. I would prefer to have a rage mechanic, because then with a rage mechanic you can justify and possibly completely mitigate the 5 drain a second that Fiery Phoenix currently has, which is a huge drain. So those are the battle avionics and what I think could really help to fix them. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. If you have any questions about any of the changes that I am recommending for these battle avionics, feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more WarFrame content, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.